August 7th, 1942, 9:40 a.m. The jungle perimeter west of Lunga Point, Guadalcanal. The air is wet and metallic, thick with cordite and rot. Flies gather before the blood even dries. Lieutenant General Harukichi Hyakutake stands beneath a canvas awning stretched between palm trunks. Boots sinking into mud, churned by artillery recoil. His field glasses are still raised, though there is little left to see. Beyond the coconut grove, stretcher bearers move in uneven lines. Some stretchers sag in the middle. A Type 92 heavy machine gun rattles somewhere forward, its metallic cough echoing in bursts. The gun crew shouts corrections over the noise. A field telephone operator cranks desperately, the wire snaking back through mud toward regimental headquarters. On a crude wooden table lies a map pinned down with ammunition clips. Colonel Kiyonao Ichiki's name is already circled in red grease pencil. Major Shigeo Nagatomi steps forward, salutes sharply. General, the battalion has been destroyed. Hyakutake lowers the glasses slowly. Sweat tracks down the dust on his face. The Imperial Japanese Army had assured him that American Marines were disorganized, shaken from Pearl Harbor and retreat. Intelligence reports claimed they lacked cohesion in jungle warfare. Their landings here were bold but fragile. A captain nearby laughs quietly, almost bitterly. They charge with bayonets into machine guns, he mutters. They do not understand spirit. Yet spirit lies scattered across the sand. Through the trees you can see it now. Bodies in khaki and olive drab, but far fewer than expected. And among the Japanese fallen, some still move. They reach weakly toward the canopy above. No one moves to retrieve them. A regimental surgeon kneels beside a corporal whose abdomen is torn open by a .30 caliber fire. The surgeon's hands are steady but resigned. His kit contains gauze, morphine, syrettes, sulfur powder. No blood plasma, no refrigeration, no transfusion equipment. The corporal's breathing is shallow, wet. The surgeon looks up. There is nothing more. The corporal's fingers clutch at his sleeve. The field hospital is atop 2 lanterns and bamboo poles. There are no motorized ambulances, no surgical trucks. Evacuation means men carrying men through swamp and sniper fire. Hyakutake listens as reports continue. The Americans are reinforcing the perimeter. Their artillery is precise. Naval gunfire from offshore cruisers, likely USS Quincy and USS Vincennes, has shattered the tree line twice this morning. But what unsettles him is something else. A runner arrives breathless. General prisoners report that wounded Marines are flown out. Hyakutake turns sharply. Flown? Yes, sir. Aircraft. They say the Americans have transport planes landing on Henderson Field. Henderson Field. The airstrip still contested. He dismisses it with a flick of his hand. Propaganda. The idea is absurd. Aircraft reserved for wounded men. In this humidity on this island, war is endurance. War is sacrifice. Casualties are inevitable. Replacement is the solution. Across the clearing, another Japanese soldier stops moving. The surgeon wipes his hands on a cloth already stiff with blood. He glances toward the distant drone overhead. At first it sounds like thunder, then distinct twin engines. Radial, an American S-47. Skytrain arcs low over the tree line, banking toward the strip. Its olive-drab fuselage flashes briefly in sunlight before vanishing behind palms. The Japanese officers watch in silence. You can feel the shift, subtle but present. Not fear. Not yet. Confusion. In the American perimeter, Navy corpsmen kneel beside wounded Marines inserting plasma bottles suspended from rifle barrels stuck into sand. A corpsman named Pharmacist's Mate First Class John Harlan tightens a tourniquet above a shattered thigh. Stay with me, Marine. You're going home. Morphine. Plasma. Rapid stabilization. Within hours, that Marine will be loaded onto the C-47, accompanied by a flight nurse from the U.S. Army Nurse Corps. The engines will vibrate through his stretcher as he leaves the island alive. Back in the Japanese lines, Captain Masao Tanaka observes the same aircraft returning empty. He shakes his head. They waste fuel on dying men. General Hyakutake says nothing. He believes in decisive battle. In annihilation, in the doctrine that one overwhelming blow will end American resolve. Logistics are secondary. Medicine is mercy, not strategy. But as afternoon humidity rises, another report arrives. American wounded from the dawn assault are already being replaced in the line. Hyakutake frowns. How many? Unknown, sir. But our observers say positions that were firing at dawn are firing again. The implication hangs in the air. Japanese doctrine accepts loss as proof of honor. The emperor demands sacrifice. Reinforcements will come by transport ship. Men can be replaced, but trained men take time. And here in the suffocating heat of Guadalcanal, time feels different. A Japanese private shot through the chest at 8:10 a.m. still breathes at 9:55. His comrades have moved on. They cannot carry him. Orders are orders. He stares at the sky as the second C-47 passes overhead. In that moment, no one at Hyakutake's command tent believes disaster is minutes or months away. They believe the Americans are soft, dependent on machinery, afraid of death. They believe endurance will win. They do not yet understand that survival itself has become a weapon. The type. 92 machine gun resumes its steady rhythm. The jungle swallows the sound. Another Japanese stretcher stops halfway back to the field hospital. The bearers lower it carefully. The man is gone. General Hyakutake folds his map. Prepare the next assault, he orders. Confidence remains intact, for now. Night falls hard over Guadalcanal on August 18, 1942, 11:12 p.m. The rain begins without warning, drumming against palm fronds and helmet steel. Inside a dimly lit command shelter near the Matanikau River, Lieutenant General Harukichi Hyakutake leans over a field desk illuminated by a single oil lantern. Water creeps along the edges of the bamboo floor. Colonel Akinosuke Oka stands opposite him, boots, soaked uniform streaked with mud. The Americans are reinforcing daily Oka reports. Aircraft land at Henderson Field every afternoon. Supplies, replacements. Medical evacuation flights continue. Hyakutake studies the casualty ledger in front of him. Columns of names, units reduced to fractions. The Ichiki detachment is nearly erased. Survivors from the failed frontal assault describe Marines who should have been dead, still manning Browning M. 1919 machine guns hours later. How many Americans killed? Hyakutake asks. Unknown. Their bodies are removed quickly. Outside, stretcher-bearers stumble through darkness, carrying a sergeant whose femoral artery has been torn by shrapnel. The regimental surgeon applies pressure with gauze already reused twice. There is no refrigeration for plasma. Blood transfusion is not standard practice here. Sulfur powder slows infection but does not reverse blood loss. The sergeant's breathing becomes a shallow rasp. Evacuate him to the rear, the surgeon orders. The rear is miles of jungle. There are no motorized ambulances, no dedicated surgical hospitals, only incremental retreat from one top to another. At Henderson Field, under the glare of portable lamps shielded from enemy sight, a Douglas C-47 Skytrain idles with engines humming low. U.S. Navy corpsmen load stretchers directly from a jeep. An Army flight nurse, Lieutenant Mary Louise Hawkins, checks IV plasma bottles suspended above each patient. Each wounded Marine has already been triaged at a forward aid station within minutes of injury. Captain John Monroe, U.S. Navy medical officer, shouts over engine noise. Rotate the plasma. Keep the lines clear. We're wheels up in 3. The aircraft lifts into rain, banking toward Espiritu Santo, where a fully equipped surgical hospital awaits. Blood transfusion units, sterile, operating theaters, refrigeration antibiotics in supply. Back in the Japanese perimeter, Major Shigeo Nagatomi listens to another field report. Sir, prisoners confirm. Wounded Americans are returning to duty after weeks. Nagatomi hesitates before bringing this to Hyakutake. The general listens without expression. They exaggerate, he says quietly. War requires sacrifice, but the numbers do not lie. Japanese companies that launch attacks at dusk return at dawn, reduced by half. Of those wounded, many never reach even the primitive field hospital. Those who do often succumb to infection or hemorrhage within days. Malaria and dysentery follow survivors. Meanwhile, American units absorb casualties and remain functional. On August 21st, near the Tanaru River, another assault collapses under concentrated fire from M1 Garand rifles and 37mm anti-tank guns firing canister rounds. Japanese soldiers fall in rows across sand, still damp from rain. At 6:02 a.m., U.S. Navy Corpsman pharmacist's mate, second class George Wallen, crawls forward under fire to drag a wounded Marine back to cover. He injects morphine, applies a pressure dressing, calls for stretcher bearers. Within 40 minutes, the Marine reaches a battalion aid station staffed by Lieutenant Commander William H. Mullen. Mullen begins plasma transfusion immediately. On the Japanese side, Captain Masao Tanaka attempts to reorganize survivors. He counts faces. Many are missing. Some lie ahead groaning, calling faintly for water. A lieutenant asks permission to retrieve them. Tanaka shakes his head. Impossible. American guns dominate the field. He knows what that means. The wounded left between lines will not return. By late August, Japanese supply ships attempt night runs down the slot. The so-called Tokyo Express delivers reinforcements, but little medical equipment. Ammunition and rice take priority. Surgical instruments are limited to what regimental doctors already carry. Colonel Oka raises the issue again. Our losses are not only from bullets. Infection spreads rapidly. We lack quinine. We lack sterile supplies. Hyakutake's jaw tightens. The decisive battle will resolve this. He still believes in a single overwhelming offensive that will shatter the American perimeter and eliminate Henderson Field. Without the airstrip, evacuation flights will cease. American wounded will accumulate. He believes survival is fragile. What he does not see is the system behind it. At Noumea and Espiritu Santo Hospital, ships such as USS Solis receive patients transferred from transport aircraft. Surgeons trained in rapid trauma care operate with electric lighting, sterilized instruments, whole blood transfusions stored in refrigeration units. Casualty clearing stations are organized with precision timetables. Radio coordination ensures aircraft availability within hours. Every wounded Marine becomes a logistical priority. On September the 12th, during the Battle of Edson's Ridge, Japanese forces attack through night, darkness, bayonets fixed. Lieutenant Colonel Merritt Edson's raiders hold the ridge with artillery and concentrated small arms fire. Japanese soldiers close to within meters before being cut down. By dawn, the slope is covered with bodies. Hyakutake listens to the casualty report. Losses severe, Nagatomi says carefully. Officers killed, companies reduced beyond effectiveness. How many recovered? Hyakutake asks. Few, sir. Across the ridge, American medics move methodically. Stretchers descend toward Henderson Field. By afternoon, aircraft depart again. The pattern is undeniable now. Japanese wounded diminish the fighting strength permanently. American wounded often return. A staff officer finally voices what others avoid. General, their system preserves manpower. Hyakutake stares at the oil lamp flame flickering in humid air. War is supposed to be decided by courage and steel. Yet something intangible is shifting the balance. He dismisses the discussion. We attack again. Outside, rain begins once more. In the darkness, a Japanese private with abdominal wounds whispers for his mother. No one hears him over distant artillery. The early warnings are present in every ledger entry, every empty bunk, every aircraft engine heard overhead. But belief is stubborn. Hyakutake signs the next assault order. October 25th, 1942. 4:18 a.m. The ridgeline south of Henderson Field, Guadalcanal. The jungle is black except for the intermittent white glare of artillery bursts. Moisture hangs in the air like breath held too long. You can hear it before you see it, the low mechanical thump of American 105mm howitzers firing from concealed positions behind the airstrip. Each concussion rolls through the soil and into bone. Lieutenant General Harukichi Hyakutake crouches inside a shallow command dugout, reinforced with logs. Mud drips steadily from the roof. A field radio crackles with static, the operator adjusting dials under a canvas sheet to keep water out. Major General Kyosuke Kawaguchi stands beside the map table, finger-tracing planned axes of advance. 3 Japanese divisions are committed. The attack will be decisive. Henderson Field must fall. Once captured, American evacuation flights will cease. Their wounded will remain trapped on this island of fever and mud. That is when they will break, Kawaguchi says quietly. Hyakutake nods. Without their airstrip, they are no different from us. At 4:26 a.m., the first wave moves forward, bayonets fixed. Arisaka Type 99 rifles clutched tight. Officers whisper final orders. The jungle swallows them. Across the American perimeter, Lieutenant Colonel Lewis B. Puller listens to reports from forward listening posts. Marines brace behind sandbags. Garand's ready. Browning automatic rifles rest on bipods. Flares ignite overhead, turning jungle shadows into sharp white angles. Then the Japanese assault crashes into the line. Machine guns open. M1917. Water-cooled guns chatter with relentless rhythm. Mortars thud from behind the ridge, 81mm rounds dropping into advancing formations. Screams mix with the wet slap of bodies falling into mud. You can hear the chaos rising, the confusion, the shouted commands swallowed by artillery. At 4:41 a.m., Japanese company commander is struck in the shoulder by .30 caliber fire. He falls backward into brush, bleeding heavily. 2 soldiers attempt to drag him rearward. A mortar round detonates nearby. One bearer dies instantly. The other staggers away, deafened. The commander remains where he fell. He presses a bandage against his wound, whispering through clenched teeth. He knows the chances. Behind the American line, Navy corpsmen are already moving. Pharmacist's mate, first class Robert Ingram, slides beside a Marine with shrapnel embedded in his abdomen. He injects morphine, applies sulfur signals, stretcher bearers. Within minutes, the wounded Marine is on a jeep bouncing toward the battalion aid station. Lieutenant Commander James Zimble, U.S. Navy medical officer, works under a tent lit by shielded lamps. Plasma bottles hang from wooden frames. Blood typed and stored. Surgical instruments sterilized in portable autoclaves powered by generators. Next patient, Zimble calls hands already gloved. The rhythm is practiced. Stabilize. Transfuse. Prepare for air evacuation at first light. Back on the ridge, the Japanese assault falters. American artillery adjusts range with eerie precision, forward observers transmitting coordinates by SCR-300 radio sets. Japanese units that break through find themselves isolated, pinned by interlocking fire. At 5:03 a.m., Major General Kawaguchi receives fragmented reports. Left flank stalled. Casualties heavy. Hyakutake. Listens jaw tight. Commit reserves. But reserves moving forward encounter the same wall of fire. Bodies accumulate in shallow ravines. The wounded call for help, but stretcher teams cannot advance under direct machine gun coverage. A regimental surgeon attempts to establish a forward aid post behind a fallen tree. His kit is minimal. No plasma, no transfusion tubing, only bandages, morphine, and surgical scissors. He amputates a shattered forearm with a field knife while artillery shakes the ground around him. The patient loses consciousness from blood loss. There is no replacement blood to give. Dawn approaches. The sky lightens to a gray haze. At 6:12 a.m., a Douglas C-47 Skytrain approaches Henderson Field despite intermittent Japanese artillery fire. Its wheels touch down briefly on the pierced steel planking runway. Within 20 minutes, it is loaded with wounded Marines from the night's fighting. You can feel the contrast now. Japanese wounded lie in jungle pockets, some still alive, some already silent. American wounded are moving. Hyakutake receives the dawn casualty estimate. Severe losses, Major Nagatomi says, voice strained. Units unable to regroup. Many officers killed or incapacitated. How many will return to duty? Hyakutake asks. Nagatomi hesitates. Few, sir. He does not mention that American units struck during the night are already being reinforced by replacements flown in days earlier. Some Marines evacuated in August have returned after surgical treatment and recovery in rear hospitals. Their experience remains within the unit. Japanese companies, by contrast, shrink permanently. At 7:04 a.m., Kawaguchi looks through binoculars toward Henderson Field. He sees aircraft lifting off again. He sees vehicles moving steadily along the perimeter. American artillery still firing. "They do not weaken," he says softly. Hyakutake remains silent. This was meant to be the decisive blow. Instead, it has revealed something unexpected. The Americans absorb shock differently. Their wounded do not vanish from the war in the same way. Their system pulls men back from the edge of death and returns them to the fight. Japanese doctrine has no answer for this. Sacrifice is honorable. But attrition becomes arithmetic. By midday, the attack is officially halted. Survivors withdraw through mud and tangled roots. Many wounded are left behind. Some will die by nightfall. Others will be found by American patrols and treated as prisoners. At 12:30 p.m., inside the command dugout, Hyakutake studies the updated ledger. The numbers are worse than expected. Kawaguchi finally speaks what others fear. If we cannot eliminate their airfield, their wounded will continue to live. Hyakutake's gaze hardens. Then we eliminate it. But even as he says it, he understands something has changed. The battlefield is no longer only rifles and artillery. It is transport aircraft, refrigerated blood plasma, coordinated evacuation routes, trained surgeons waiting beyond the horizon. The unexpected has shown itself, not in a single explosion, but in the quiet survival of men who should have died. Hyakutake folds the casualty report. The jungle hums with insects as if nothing has shifted. Yet something irreversible has begun. November the 12th, 1942. 1:17 a.m. Iron Bottom Sound off Guadalcanal. The sea is black glass, shattered by muzzle flashes. Heavy cruiser J.N. Hiei shudders as her 14-inch guns fire into darkness toward Henderson Field. Each blast illuminates the deck in white shock. Salt spray mixes with cordite smoke. Signal lamps flicker frantically between ships. Vice Admiral Hiroaki Abe grips the bridge rail as American return fire begins to find range. Shell splashes rise dangerously close. The bombardment is meant to silence the airfield once and for all. Without Henderson Field, there will be no more aircraft landing, no more evacuation flights. American wounded will accumulate like Japanese wounded have for months. That will break them, Abe mutters. Below decks, damage control parties brace as 8-inch shells from USS San Francisco slam into Hiei's superstructure. Steel screams, lights flicker. Men are thrown against bulkheads. On Guadalcanal itself, Lieutenant General Harukichi Hyakutake waits for confirmation that Henderson Field has been neutralized. He believes this naval strike will correct months of imbalance. If the airstrip burns, American evacuation ceases. Their survival advantage collapses, but the night battle turns chaotic. At 1:48 a.m., Hiei takes a direct hit to her steering gear compartment. Flooding begins. Casualties mount. Japanese sailors carry burned and bleeding shipmates through narrow passageways thick with smoke. The ship's medical locker contains bandages and morphine, but no surgical suite capable of handling massive trauma at sea under sustained fire. Across the water, USS Portland lists from torpedo damage, yet her medical teams operate in compartments lit by emergency lamps. Plasma is administered even as the hull groans. You can feel the escalation now. The Japanese commit heavier forces, believing destruction of infrastructure will level the field. But American resilience is layered. Even as shells land near Henderson Field, Seabees and engineers prepare to repair the runway at dawn. By sunrise, Hiei is crippled and abandoned. Many of her wounded remain aboard as scuttling charges are set. Survivors are pulled from oil-streaked water by destroyers already overloaded. Admiral Abe's bombardment has failed to silence the airstrip. At 9:22 a.m., a Douglas C-47 Skytrain lands on Henderson Field despite scattered shell craters. Engineers have filled holes with crushed coral and steel matting through the night. The aircraft taxis cautiously as Marines unload ammunition and medical supplies simultaneously. Captain Joseph P. Whaling, U.S. Navy medical officer, reviews the incoming wounded from the naval battle. Sailors burned by flash fires are treated with sterile dressings and morphine. Those requiring surgery are prioritized for evacuation. Within hours, aircraft depart again. Hyakutake receives the news slowly. Henderson Field remains operational, Major Nagatomi reports. Hyakutake's silence stretches long. What of Admiral Abe's force? Severe losses. The plan to equalize attrition through destruction of the airstrip has misfired. Japanese naval losses now add to the growing ledger of irreplaceable manpower. On November the 13th, renewed assaults push toward the American perimeter. Japanese infantry units already reduced are ordered forward again. Officers speak of honor of final effort. But many soldiers march with untreated malaria, weakened by dysentery, their bodies already compromised. At 3:40 p.m., an artillery barrage precedes another ground assault. American 155mm guns answer with crushing accuracy. The jungle canopy splinters. Casualties spike within minutes. A Japanese lieutenant is struck by shrapnel that tears through his abdomen. He collapses beside a fallen palm trunk. Two soldiers attempt to lift him, but machine gun fire sweeps the clearing. They retreat. The lieutenant stares upward, lips moving without sound. On the American side, a Marine hit by mortar fragments is stabilized within 12 minutes at a forward aid station. Blood plasma flows through a glass bottle suspended from a rifle barrel. Corpsmen record his blood type on a tag attached to his uniform. By evening, he is en route to a rear hospital. The disparity compounds daily. Hyakutake convenes his staff on November 18th. Maps are stained with moisture and sweat. Units once counted in thousands are now reported in hundreds. Colonel Oka speaks carefully. Our casualty replacement cannot keep pace. Wounded do not return. Hyakutake responds sharply. Then we must inflict greater losses. But inflicting losses does not produce symmetry. American industry continues to supply aircraft plasma, antibiotics, trained surgeons. Japanese logistics struggle even to deliver rice and ammunition. By late November, starvation begins to rival gunfire as a killer. Weak soldiers are more susceptible to infection. Minor wounds become fatal within days. A regimental surgeon writes in his log that he has performed amputations with dull instruments, lacking proper sterilization. Post-operative infections are nearly universal. Meanwhile, at Noumea and Espiritu Santo Hospital, facilities expand. Whole blood transfusions become routine. Wounded Marines from Guadalcanal are photographed weeks later, walking on crutches, some already requesting return to duty. Hyakutake hears reports of this but dismisses them as exaggerated morale stories. Yet the evidence is in front of him. Companies reduced beyond combat effectiveness. Officers gone. Veterans not replaced with equal experience. He still believes one final concentrated offensive can reverse the tide. But escalation has become misjudgment. Each new commitment drains strength that cannot be restored. On December the 2nd, Imperial General Headquarters in Tokyo finally acknowledges the situation is untenable. Orders begin to form for evacuation of Guadalcanal. Hyakutake reads the coded message in silence. Evacuation. The word carries weight heavier than artillery. Months earlier, he believed American casualties would force withdrawal. Instead, Japanese forces are the ones collapsing under cumulative loss. The wounded left in jungle clearings. The officers who never returned. The men who might have survived with different care. The battlefield advantage extended beyond rifles and ships. It moved through air corridors and surgical tents and refrigerated plasma stores. Hyakutake closes his eyes briefly. Escalation has not corrected imbalance. It has magnified it. December 31st, 1942. 6:05 p.m. A rain-soaked clearing near Cape Esperance, Guadalcanal. The light fades quickly in the tropics. Mosquitoes thicken in the humid air, swarming around lanterns hung from bent branches. Lieutenant General Harukichi Hyakutake stands outside a medical shelter fashioned from torn canvas and bamboo poles. The smell is unmistakable. Infection. Blood. Rot. Inside, a regimental surgeon works over a young private whose leg was shattered by artillery that morning. The bone fragments are visible through torn flesh. There is no X-ray, no transfusion apparatus. Only a field knife bandages boiled in a dented pot and morphine measured sparingly. The surgeon looks up as Hyakutake steps in. General amputation is possible. Survival is unlikely. Hyakutake nods once. Outside, Captain Masao Tanaka approaches with a casualty ledger protected in oilcloth. General strength reports for 3 regiments. Hyakutake reads silently. Units that landed months ago as full formations now resemble skeleton structures. Companies reduced to platoon size. Platoons reduced to squads. Disease cases rising daily. How many returned to duty this week? Hyakutake asks. Tanaka hesitates. 17, sir. Mostly minor wounds. 17. Across the jungle, American forces prepare for the new year with a different rhythm. At Henderson Field, mechanics service aircraft under portable floodlights. A C-47 Skytrain rests at the end of the runway, engines cooling after a late arrival from Espiritu Santo. Inside nearby medical tents, Navy surgeons perform abdominal surgery under electric lighting powered by generators. Plasma and whole blood are stored in insulated containers replenished regularly by air. Lieutenant Commander William Mullen reviews charts. 3 men stabilized today who would have died in August, he says to a corpsman. Get them on tomorrow's flight. The corpsman nods, marking evacuation tags carefully. The contrast is no longer subtle. Japanese patrols moving along the Mataniko encounter American units that were mauled in previous engagements yet remain operational. Faces are familiar. Men once reported wounded now stand behind machine guns again. Private First Class Kenji Sato whispers to a comrade after spotting a Marine he is certain he shot weeks earlier. He should be dead. The comrade says nothing. At headquarters, Major Shigeo Nagatomi spreads out replacement projections. Tokyo promises reinforcements, but shipping lanes are threatened by American submarines. Destroyers running night missions cannot carry heavy medical equipment. Even basic quinine supplies are inconsistent. Hyakutake studies the figures. Our combat losses, Nagatomi begins cautiously, are not symmetrical. Hyakutake's gaze sharpens. Explain. American wounded frequently survive. Many return. Our wounded rarely do. Our units diminish permanently. The words hang heavy. It is arithmetic now, not ideology. Hyakutake steps outside again. Rain begins softly tapping against palm leaves. He watches stretcher bearers struggle through mud with another soldier whose chest wound bubbles with each breath. The surgeon will try. He will fail. Not because of lack of skill, but because of lack of means. On January the 2nd, 1943, Imperial General Headquarters finalizes Operation K, the evacuation of Guadalcanal. Officially, it is described as a strategic redeployment. Unofficially, it is acknowledgement of collapse. Hyakutake gathers senior officers under the flicker of oil lamps. We will withdraw in phases, he says evenly. Discipline must be maintained. No one speaks of defeat, but the turning point has already occurred. It was not a single battle, not a single shell. It was the cumulative effect of survival denied. In the American perimeter, a Marine named Corporal James Donovan writes a letter home from a hospital bed in Noumea. He describes being hit by shrapnel at Edson's Ridge, receiving plasma within minutes, flying out the next day. He expects to return to his unit once healed. He believes this is normal. Back on Guadalcanal, Japanese soldiers who suffer similar wounds rarely leave the island alive. On January the 14th, evacuation destroyers slip into Iron Bottom Sound under darkness. Weak and emaciated soldiers board quietly. Many are feverish. Many carry untreated wounds. Hyakutake remains until the final phase. He walks one last time past the medical shelter. The surgeon sits exhausted beside a row of bodies covered in ponchos. How many today? Hyakutake asks. 12 from wounds. 9 from disease. Hyakutake nods. He does not ask how many might have lived with plasma antibiotics surgical facilities beyond tops and boiling pots. He already knows. The battlefield has expanded beyond gunfire. It includes logistics, industry transport, aircraft, refrigeration units, training pipelines for surgeons and nurses. Japan underestimated that dimension. They believed endurance would compensate. Instead, endurance without support became attrition without recovery. On February 9, 1943, the last Japanese troops depart Guadalcanal. Henderson Field remains active aircraft lifting and landing in steady rhythm. Hyakutake reads the final casualty figures aboard a destroyer cutting north through dark water. Thousands lost, many to wounds that might not have been fatal elsewhere. He closes the ledger slowly. The turning point no one wanted to admit has passed. Guadalcanal is gone, and with it, the illusion that sacrifice alone could equal survival, sustained by system and industry. The war moves forward, but the imbalance has been revealed. November 20th, 1943. 9:12 a.m. The lagoon at Tarawa, Betio Island. The tide is lower than predicted. Landing craft grind to a halt on coral reefs hundreds of yards from shore. You can hear the metallic clatter of ramps dropping into waist-deep water. Machine gun fire from Japanese Type 92 positions rips across the lagoon in straight, disciplined lines. Major General Julian C. Smith of the U.S. 2nd Marine Division watches through binoculars from the command ship USS Maryland as the first wave struggles forward. Amphibious tractors burn. Men fall into the surf. On the island, Rear Admiral Keiji Shibazaki stands inside a reinforced concrete bunker. The structure is thick-layered with coconut logs and sand. He grips the edge of a periscope observing American casualties mounting along the seawall. "They cannot cross," he says with confidence. "It would take 1 million men, 100 years to take Tarawa." Artillery officers adjust range. 8-centimeter naval guns fire methodically. Mortars drop into packed Marines pinned against the reef. For the first hours, Shibazaki's confidence seems justified. American casualties are heavy. Marines wounded in open water bleed into the tide before reaching cover. Corpsmen crawl through surf with aid kits held high. The sound is constant. Rifles, machine guns, explosions, shouts cut short. Yet even here something different unfolds. At 9:47 a.m., a Marine hit through the abdomen is dragged behind a disabled LVT. A corpsman named Pharmacist's Mate 3rd Class John H. Willis presses gauze into the wound while another Marine shields them with suppressive fire. Plasma is administered from a rubber tubing set carried ashore in waterproof containers. "Hold on," Willis shouts over gunfire. The wounded Marine is stabilized on the sand. Behind the line, improvised aid stations form within hours. Surgeons who came ashore with assault units begin operating inside shattered bunkers, captured by midday. By 1:30 p.m., naval landing craft modified for casualty evacuation begin ferrying wounded back to ships equipped with surgical wards. USS Solace waits offshore, white hull marked clearly. Operating rooms are active, sterile instruments laid out, whole blood ready. Shibazaki receives reports that American wounded are being removed rapidly. He dismisses it. Even if they survive, they cannot replace the dead today. But he does not yet grasp the scale of replacement behind the horizon. Transport ships offshore carry reserve battalions. Aircraft from carriers provide close air support. Engineers prepare to repair airstrips the moment Betio is secured. By afternoon, American forces breach sections of the seawall. Close quarters, fighting erupts among bunkers and trenches. Flamethrowers clear fortified positions. Japanese defenders fight to the last in many sectors. A Japanese corporal suffers a severe leg wound from a grenade blast. He is carried into a bunker where a medical orderly attempts to bind the stump with limited supplies. There is no plasma, no transfusion, no evacuation route off the island. The corporal grips the orderly's wrist. "Will I be sent home?" he asks. The orderly cannot answer. Outside, U.S. Navy corpsmen continue pulling wounded Marines toward landing craft. Within hours, many are aboard hospital ships receiving surgery under electric lighting, with refrigeration preserving blood supplies. By nightfall on November the 21st, Shibazaki's bunker is struck by naval gunfire. The admiral is killed instantly. Command fractures. Japanese defenders continue resisting fiercely, but coordination deteriorates. Ammunition dwindles. Wounded accumulate in sealed bunkers without adequate care. Infection begins almost immediately in tropical heat. On November the 23rd, organized resistance ends. Out of roughly 4,000 800 Japanese defenders, only a handful survive. The vast majority die where they stand, many from wounds untreated. American losses are also severe. Over 1,000 Marines killed, thousands wounded, but the wounded are alive. Within days, aircraft begin operating from the captured airstrip. Medical evacuation flights resume transporting injured from Tarawa to rear hospitals. Major General Julian Smith visits USS Solace on November 24th. He walks past rows of Marines recovering from surgery. A surgeon speaks quietly. Without plasma and rapid evacuation, many of these men would not be here. Smith nods. Back in Tokyo. Imperial General Headquarters reviews Tarawa casualty figures. Reports confirm that American wounded survival rates remain high, despite initial slaughter at the reef. General Hideki Tojo listens as staff officers summarize. The Americans sustain heavy casualties yet maintain operational tempo. Their medical evacuation systems function even under assault conditions. Tojo's expression tightens. What of ours? Limited. Evacuation from isolated islands is nearly impossible under enemy air superiority. Shock settles not in a single moment, but across successive reports. Japanese doctrine assumes that inflicting high casualties will break American will. Yet the Americans absorb those casualties differently. Survival transforms loss into temporary setback rather than permanent depletion. In forward American units, Marines wounded at Tarawa will recover in Hawaii and California, some eventually returning to combat divisions, preparing for the next operation. Japanese defenders of Tarawa do not return. The arithmetic widens. By early 1944, as planning begins for operations deeper into the Central Pacific U.S. Navy and Marine Corps, medical planners expand casualty evacuation capacity further. Dedicated hospital ships increase. Air transport squadrons coordinate tightly with ground units. Training for corpsmen intensifies. Japanese planners, constrained by shrinking shipping capacity and increasing submarine losses, cannot replicate this system. Shock turns to confusion within Imperial headquarters. How do they continue, one officer asks quietly. The answer lies not only in factories producing aircraft carriers and bombers. It lies in men who survive wounds that once meant certain death. Tarawa does not break American resolve. It reinforces a pattern. Japanese generals now face a reality they cannot easily reverse. June 15th, 1944. 7:02 a.m. The western beaches of Saipan. The sky is a hard, brilliant blue, already vibrating with the drone of aircraft engines. U.S. Navy carrier planes sweep overhead in tight formations, diving toward Japanese artillery positions, hidden in cane fields and limestone ridges. The sea behind the assault waves is crowded with gray hulls. Battleships fire in measured sequence, their 16-inch shells tearing into the island's defenses. Lieutenant General Yoshitsugu Saito stands inside a reinforced command cave carved into Mount Tapochau. A field telephone receiver is pressed against his ear. Dust drifts from the ceiling with each naval impact. The Americans are landing in strength, a regimental commander reports. Tanks, amphibious tractors, heavy artillery. Saito lowers the receiver slowly. The plan conceived months earlier had been clear. Decisive engagement on the beaches. Inflict massive casualties during the landing. Destroy American momentum before they can establish airfields. Force negotiation through shock and blood. He believed, as others did, that American society would recoil from sustained losses. Outside, the first waves of Marines and Army soldiers advance under fire. Japanese 75mm field guns open up from concealed positions. Machine gun nests rake the shoreline. The opening hours are brutal. But behind the advancing lines, medical teams move with equal intensity. At 7:38 a.m., a soldier from the U.S. 27th Infantry Division is struck by shrapnel that penetrates his chest. He collapses near a seawall of coral rock. Within minutes, a medic crawls to him, checks breathing, inserts a needle for plasma. A morphine syringe is pinned to the soldier's collar to mark dosage. "Evacuation team," the medic shouts. Stretcher bearers appear despite incoming fire. Within the hour, that soldier is aboard a landing craft modified for casualty evacuation. By midday, he reaches a hospital ship anchored offshore, its surgical suites already operating at capacity. Inside the cave headquarters, Saito listens to casualty reports. American wounded are being removed continuously, a staff officer says. Their dead remain on the beaches, but the wounded disappear. Saito frowns. Disappear. Carried to ships, sir. Aircraft observed landing on recently secured airstrips in rear areas. The Americans have already seized portions of the island sufficient to begin engineering operations. Seabees level ground even as fighting continues. Portable surgical hospitals are established within days. Japanese wounded accumulate in caves and jungle clearings. Medical orderlies lack antibiotics. Sulfur supplies are dwindling. Blood transfusion capability is virtually non-existent. Evacuation off Saipan is impossible under American naval dominance. At 10:12 a.m., a Japanese captain with a severe abdominal wound is carried into a cave shelter. The regimental doctor examines him under dim lantern light. "There is no way to operate here," the doctor whispers. "Even if we try, he will not survive." The captain nods weakly. Outside, American artillery tightens its range. Naval gunfire coordinates with forward observers using SCR-300 radios. Japanese defensive lines shrink gradually, forced back toward the island's center. By June 18th, American forces have secured an airstrip. Within hours, transport aircraft begin landing. Not only reinforcements, but evacuation flights. The system that proved decisive on Guadalcanal and Tarawa now operates at larger scale. Lieutenant General Saito receives intelligence from Tokyo, urging a final decisive counterattack. The expectation remains that massed banzai charges can shatter American lines. Saito assembles his senior officers. "We will attack at night," he says. "We will break through their artillery perimeter." Yet even as he speaks, he sees the casualty projections. Japanese units have already lost irreplaceable manpower in initial engagements. Many wounded lie untreated in jungle ravines, succumbing to infection or dehydration. American units, though battered, remain numerically stable. Reinforcements flow from ships. Wounded are removed and replaced. On June 22nd, a large-scale Japanese counterattack launches under darkness. Hundreds surge forward, shouting. American defensive positions respond with coordinated rifle fire, machine guns, and pre-registered artillery. The ground shakes continuously. By dawn, the attack has collapsed. Bodies carpet the fields. The wounded who survive the initial fire are trapped between lines. American medics move cautiously, once resistance subsides, retrieving their own. Japanese wounded often remain where they fell. Inside Mount Tapochau, Saito receives final tallies. "Losses catastrophic," a colonel states bluntly. "Combat effectiveness degraded beyond recovery." Saito walks deeper into the cave. The air smells of damp stone and sweat. The original plan has failed. Inflicting heavy casualties has not halted the American advance. Their medical and logistical systems absorb punishment and regenerate strength. Japanese forces diminish with each engagement permanently. On June 27th, American B-29 superfortresses begin using Saipan's airfields to strike targets in the Japanese home islands. The strategic implications ripple outward. The battlefield advantage has moved beyond survival of individual soldiers. It now enables strategic reach. Saito gathers remaining officers on July 6th. "There will be a final attack," he announces. They understand what that means. On July 7th, thousands of Japanese soldiers and civilians surge forward in the largest banzai charge of the Pacific War. American artillery and automatic weapons cut them down in horrific numbers. When it ends, organized resistance on Saipan is finished. The collapse is not merely tactical. It is systemic. The belief that shock casualties would break American will has disintegrated. Instead, Japanese forces have exhausted themselves against an enemy that restores wounded men, replenishes units, and expands operations simultaneously. Inside the abandoned cave, casualty reports lie scattered across a wooden crate. The original plan has not bent. It has shattered. October 20th, 1944, 9:03 a.m. Red Beach Leyte, Gulf Philippine Islands. The surf rolls steadily against the hulls of landing craft as U.S. Army troops wade ashore beneath the watchful guns of the 7th Fleet. General Douglas MacArthur stands knee-deep in water, moments later cameras capturing his return. Offshore hospital ships wait beyond the horizon line, white hulls gleaming under tropical sun. In Tokyo, senior officers gather around a large operations table. The Philippines are essential. Oil from the Dutch East Indies flows north through these waters. If Leyte falls, Japan's strategic arteries constrict. General Tomoyuki Yamashita receives orders to hold the archipelago at all costs. "We must inflict unacceptable losses," a staff officer says. "Break their landing force before they consolidate." The assumption remains familiar. Massive casualties will halt American momentum. On Leyte, Japanese artillery hidden in the hills begins firing. Mortars arc downward into crowded beachheads. American casualties mount quickly in the first hours. Medics run through sand and shattered palm trunks, ducking between craters. At 9:41 a.m., a U.S. Army infantryman from the 24th Division is struck by machine gun fire in the thigh. Blood pulses rapidly through torn fabric. A medic kneels beside him within seconds, applies a tourniquet, administers morphine marks, the time on a field card. Plasma is started from a lightweight kit designed for amphibious assault. "Stay awake," the medic orders. Within 20 minutes, the soldier is carried to a landing craft assigned solely to casualty evacuation. By afternoon, he's aboard a hospital ship with full surgical facilities. Surgeons operate under bright lights. Whole blood stored in refrigeration units is transfused steadily. Japanese commanders observe American casualty movement through binoculars. They remove them immediately, one colonel notes. Yamashita listens but focuses on operational maneuvers. Reinforcements are rushed into mountainous terrain. Defensive lines form along ridges and jungle roads. Yet the situation is different from earlier island battles. American air superiority dominates daylight skies. Transport aircraft move constantly between Leyte and rear bases. Portable surgical hospitals expand as beachheads secure. Japanese wounded from initial engagements are carried into jungle shelters where supplies are scarce. Antibiotics are limited. Evacuation by sea is nearly impossible under American naval presence. Air evacuation does not exist. In one hillside cave, a Japanese lieutenant with a chest wound struggles for breath. A medic attempts to drain fluid with improvised equipment. There is no blood transfusion, no oxygen supply. The lieutenant's breathing slows, then stops. The medic wipes sweat from his face and moves to the next patient. Back at Imperial General Headquarters, naval leaders propose a dramatic response. The combined fleet will sortie to Leyte Gulf in a complex maneuver intended to destroy American landing forces. Vice Admiral Takeo Kurita prepares battleships including Yamato and Musashi for a high-risk engagement. The logic is familiar. Deliver a crushing blow. Reverse momentum. But when the Battle of Leyte Gulf unfolds between October the 23rd and 26th, the cost is staggering. Musashi absorbs repeated bomb and torpedo hits from American carrier aircraft. Damage control teams fight flooding with limited medical capability aboard. Burned sailors receive morphine and bandages in cramped compartments. Many die before ships can withdraw. American carrier task forces rotate damaged ships rearward efficiently. Wounded sailors are evacuated to fleet medical facilities equipped with surgical wards. When the smoke clears, the Japanese Navy has lost irreplaceable capital ships and experienced crews. On Leyte itself, fighting grinds through mountains and jungle valleys. Japanese units attempt night infiltration attacks seeking to disrupt American supply lines. Casualties mount on both sides, yet American divisions remain numerically stable. Replacement troops arrive steadily. Wounded evacuated earlier begin recovery in field hospitals in New Guinea and the Philippines, some expected to return to duty. Japanese units thin. Yamashita receives updated strength reports in November. Effective combat strength reduced by disease and wounds, a staff officer states quietly. Evacuation of wounded impractical. Yamashita understands the pattern now. Each engagement reduces his forces permanently. American losses are severe, but temporary for many. Attempts to recover the initiative multiply. Kamikaze attacks begin in earnest during Leyte operations. Pilots volunteer for one-way missions, striking American ships with explosive-laden aircraft. It is a desperate measure. Even here, American damage control and medical systems respond rapidly. On USS St. Lo struck by a kamikaze on October the 25th. Medical teams treat burned sailors amid smoke and chaos. Survivors are transferred to hospital ships. Japanese pilots who crash into decks do not return. By December, Leyte is effectively secured by American forces. Airfields are operational. Transport aircraft depart daily, carrying wounded to advanced surgical hospitals. Refrigerated blood supplies continue flowing forward. In Manila, Japanese garrisons brace for the next assault. Yamashita studies casualty projections and logistical shortages. Rice supplies dwindle. Ammunition rationed. Medical stocks critically low. Attempts to recover lost strategic ground have consumed additional manpower and material that cannot be replaced. The imbalance has widened. What began on Guadalcanal as a subtle divergence in survival rates now defines entire campaigns. Japanese forces fight with determination and courage. But wounds that might have healed elsewhere become death sentences. Units diminish not only through enemy fire, but through untreated injury and infection. American formations, though bloodied repeatedly, remain whole enough to continue advancing. The effort to regain momentum has instead accelerated depletion. In Tokyo, leaders sense the shrinking margin of possibility. Yet, the war presses forward. February 19th, 1945. 8:59 a.m. The volcanic beaches of Iwo Jima. The sand is black and soft, swallowing boots with each step. Smoke drifts across the shoreline from naval bombardment that has pounded the island for days. You can hear the low rumble of battleship guns still firing inland, methodical, relentless. Lieutenant General Tadamichi Kuribayashi stands deep within a reinforced command tunnel, carved beneath Mount Suribachi. Electric lights, powered by generators, cast a dim yellow glow along damp concrete walls. Telephones ring intermittently. Reports come in fragments. The Americans are landing in heavy numbers. Kuribayashi nods slowly. He expected this. His defenses are designed not for a single beach slaughter, but for prolonged attrition. Hidden artillery, interlocking machine gun nests, miles of underground tunnels allowing movement unseen. The plan is not to repel them outright. It is to make them bleed. Above ground, U.S. Marines struggle forward under withering fire from concealed positions. Casualties mount quickly. Stretcher teams weave through craters, pulling wounded from exposed sand. At 9:27 a.m., a Marine is struck by a sniper round that fractures his pelvis. He collapses face down in the ash. A corpsman named Pharmacist's mate, Second Class John Bradley, reaches him under fire, rolls him, gently administers morphine, applies pressure dressings. "Hold on," Bradley says firmly. Within minutes, additional Marines create a protective ring, while stretcher-bearers move the wounded man toward the waterline. Landing craft configured for casualty evacuation wait just offshore. By afternoon, he is aboard USS Samaritan, where surgeons perform complex orthopedic surgery under bright operating lamps. Inside Kuribayashi's tunnel, a colonel reports, "American wounded are being removed continuously despite our fire." Kuribayashi exhales slowly. "They have mastered the art of sustaining themselves," he replies. Japanese defenders fight with extraordinary discipline. They conserve ammunition, allow Marines to advance before unleashing close-range fire. Casualties among American units are severe during the first days. Yet by February 23rd, U.S. Marines raise the flag atop Mount Suribachi. The image spreads quickly across American newspapers, though the fighting continues for weeks. Below ground, Japanese wounded fill tunnel chambers. Medical supplies are limited to bandages, basic surgical tools, diminishing morphine. There is no evacuation, no aircraft, no hospital ships waiting beyond range. A young Japanese private with abdominal wounds whispers to a medic in the darkness, "Will I see home again?" The medic remains silent. Both know the answer. As days pass, American engineers establish more secure landing zones. Portable surgical hospitals operate near the beachhead. Transport aircraft stand ready at nearby bases to receive stabilized patients. Kuribayashi reviews casualty reports from his own divisions. Wounded beyond recovery, a staff officer states quietly. Many unable to fight further. Kuribayashi understands the arithmetic now more clearly than ever. Every wounded Japanese soldier reduces available combat strength permanently. Every wounded American may represent a temporary loss. By March 1st, American units continue advancing yard by yard through the island's northern sectors. Casualties are still heavy, yet reinforcements flow steadily from ships offshore. Replacement units integrate into depleted companies. Kuribayashi walks through a tunnel chamber filled with wounded men. The air is thick and stale. Lanterns flicker. One officer attempts to stand and salute despite a shattered leg. Kuribayashi kneels beside him instead. "You have done your duty," he says quietly. He knows that survival here is unlikely. On March 16th, organized Japanese resistance effectively ends. Isolated pockets continue fighting, but the outcome is sealed. American casualty lists are long. Thousands killed and wounded. Yet hospital ships departing Iwo Jima carry men who will live. Many will return to units preparing for Okinawa. Japanese defenders lie buried within tunnels or beneath volcanic ash. The moment of realization does not come in a single dramatic declaration. It arrives as a quiet, cumulative understanding. Japanese strategy sought to make invasion too costly. Yet cost alone has not halted American advance. Their capacity to preserve life under fire has transformed what would once have been crippling losses into survivable setbacks. Kuribayashi writes his final message to Tokyo before communication collapses. The enemy's material strength and ability to sustain casualties exceed expectations. In that understatement lies the truth. The battlefield has evolved into a system of survival. The side that retrieves its wounded, that restores its fighters, that moves men through corridors of care and back again, holds an advantage no single charge can overcome. The realization settles heavily in command tunnels and headquarters rooms across the shrinking empire. The imbalance is no longer deniable. It is definitive. April 1st, 1945. 8:32 a.m., the western beaches of Okinawa. The sea is crowded with ships stretching to the horizon. Battleships, cruisers, destroyers, transports. The sky hums with aircraft in layered formations. Operation Iceberg has begun. Lieutenant General Mitsuru Ushijima stands within the stone corridors of Shuri Castle headquarters. Maps cover wooden tables. Telephone lines snake across the floor. He listens to the distant rumble of naval bombardment echoing across the island. The Americans have landed in strength, a staff officer reports. Minimal resistance on the beaches, Ushijima nods. He has chosen a different strategy. Rather than contest the shoreline, he will draw American forces south into prepared defensive positions. Attrition will be the weapon. Make them pay in blood for every ridge, every cave. Outside, U.S. Army and Marine units advance cautiously inland. Casualties begin almost immediately as Japanese artillery opens from concealed positions. Mortars descend into columns, moving through sugarcane fields. At 9:14 a.m., a Marine from the 6th Division is struck by shrapnel that tears into his shoulder and chest. He falls backward into mud. A corpsman reaches him within moments, cuts away fabric, applies pressure dressings, starts plasma from a compact kit designed specifically for amphibious assault. "Breathe," the corpsman says firmly. Within an hour, the Marine is on a landing craft headed toward a hospital ship equipped with full surgical wards. Refrigerated blood stores are ready. Antibiotics are administered immediately after surgery. His chances of survival are strong. Inside Shuri Castle, Ushijima receives casualty figures from the first week of fighting. American losses significant, a colonel notes. However, they continue advancing. Reports also confirm constant air evacuation flights from secured airstrips. Hospital ships rotate in and out of anchorage with mechanical regularity. Replacement troops arrive even as wounded depart. Japanese wounded accumulate in cave networks carved into limestone ridges. Supplies are already strained. Sulfur drugs are limited. There are no blood transfusion systems comparable to those offshore. A young Japanese officer wounded in the abdomen during an artillery exchange is carried into a cave shelter. The regimental doctor examines him under flickering lantern light. "There is little we can do," the doctor says quietly. The officer understands. Weeks pass. Rain turns hillsides into rivers of mud. American artillery pounds Shuri line defenses relentlessly. Casualties mount on both sides. Yet the pattern remains. American divisions sustain heavy losses during assaults on Kakazoo Ridge, Sugarloaf Hill, Shuri itself. Thousands wounded, hundreds killed in single engagements, but evacuation flows continuously. Aircraft depart to Okinawa daily, carrying stabilized patients to Guam, Saipan, Hawaii, even the continental United States. Surgical innovations developed over years of Pacific fighting are now routine. Whole blood transfusions, mobile surgical hospitals, coordinated triage systems. Men who would have died in 1942 now survive in 1945. Ushijima studies his own reports by candlelight. Effective combat strength. Declining steadily, a staff officer says. Wounded, unable to return to duty. Ammunition limited. Food scarce. By May, Japanese defensive lines crumble under sustained assault. Shuri Castle is abandoned after relentless bombardment. American forces push south toward the Kaian Peninsula. Civilian casualties mount tragically as fighting engulfs villages and caves. On June 18th, U.S. Army Lieutenant General Simon Bolivar Buckner Jr. is killed by artillery fire while observing the front lines. Even senior commanders are not immune to the island's violence. Yet even Buckner's loss does not halt the American advance. Command transitions smoothly. The operational system continues. Inside a collapsing cave near Mabuni, Ushijima and his Chief of Staff, Lieutenant General Izumu Cho, review the final situation. There is no possibility of reversal, Cho states bluntly. Ushijima nods. He has witnessed months of relentless pressure. Not only from artillery and armor, but from a logistical machine that preserves American fighting strength despite staggering casualties. Japanese wounded have filled caves and shallow graves. Many died from injuries that in another system might have been survivable. On June 22, 1945, Ushijima performs ritual suicide. Cho follows shortly after. Above ground. American medics continue working among the last wounded of the campaign. Even as the island falls silent, aircraft engines can still be heard lifting off with patients bound for rear hospitals. By the end of Okinawa, American casualties exceed 12,000 killed and more than 36,000 wounded. Japanese military, dead number, over 100,000. The arithmetic is merciless. In Tokyo, remaining leaders confront a narrowing horizon. Air raids intensify over the home islands. B-29 superfortresses operate freely from bases secured through campaigns where survival systems prove decisive. The imbalance that began subtly on Guadalcanal has culminated in overwhelming disparity. On August 15, 1945, Emperor Hirohito addresses the nation by radio. The war is over. Across the Pacific, hospital wards remain full of recovering American soldiers and Marines. Many will carry scars for life. Many will walk again who would once have been buried on distant beaches. In the caves of Okinawa and the jungles of earlier islands, countless Japanese wounded never had that chance. The realization that survival itself had become a weapon came too late to alter the course.